On today's Cowboys, we're taking a look at ESPN's Bill Barnwell's plan to fix the Cowboys this offseason, a five-step plan. Not quite perfect offseason, but fix the Cowboys anyway. Now, Barnwell said he tried to keep things as realistic and reasonable as possible, so no crazy trades or signings. 5 steps of this one. Now, we will probably do our own offseason plan to fix the Cowboys, the perfect dream offseason, etc. If you do want us to do that pretty early after the season ends, show it by liking today's video for me right now. Let's go step by step on the ESPN plan. Number 1 for them was to quote-unquote undo the 2024 offseason. Now, Barnwell specifically says not the Lamb contracts, not the Dak extension, but the other big things they did. They didn't make very many big moves. He mentioned moving on from Ezekiel Elliott, Eric Kendricks, and Mike Zimmer as the running back, linebacker, and Cowboys defensive coordinator. I don't think many are going to disagree about Zeke. The numbers have not been good. The play has declined. He is who he is at this point. He's just not a very reliable runner. They didn't pay him that much, so this one is a pretty easy, obviously, don't bring back. Barnwell was pretty critical of Eric Kendricks, saying he's a great player for a long time, not NFL caliber linebacker anymore. Barnwell's right, he doesn't have great range, but I don't think he's been a massive liability either. But if moving on from Zimmer, in theory, or probably move on from Kendricks, got to go get a new linebacker. So not as vehemently on board with that one as I was the Zeke one. He also had to move on from Mike Zimmer, saying he hasn't built a reliable run defense, and Dallas is the league's worst first and second down defenses. And for the first 9 weeks, absolutely true. They were a bad defense. It's really hard to win games when you're 30th in EPA per play in the first half of the season. The record was, in part, because the defense was terrible. Now, the schedule's gotten a little bit easy the past 6 weeks. Not overly easy. They've played some tough games in the stretch. They've rounded into a top 10 defense the past 6 weeks. Now, the overall sample size is not very good. I do think these next 3 games against better offenses, Tampa, Philadelphia, Washington, who you already beat once, by the way, does matter in potential Zimmer return, but I am not nearly as anti-Zimmer as Barnwell came off in the article. So what do you want? Do you want Mike Zimmer back as the Cowboys DC in 2025? All things being equal, if you're like me and you want to let the next head coach decide, I think that counts as a yes. It's really, are you on board if the new staff wants Zimmer to come in? Why for yes and for no? Go vote at the pinned comment of today's show, especially that ad comes here on YouTube. Step number 2 was to move on from Mike McCarthy. This one probably has much more close to unanimous agreement there. I think Barnwell actually summed it up pretty well with this quote on Mike McCarthy. He was better than he was at his worst in Green Bay, but the bar is a lot higher in Dallas. He isn't a bad coach, but he's not making the team drastically better in 2025. There is someone out there who can do that. I think that actually is a pretty good summation of Mike McCarthy. I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I just don't think he's good enough for what this Cowboys team wants to be. With even some of their own self-imposed limitations, I don't think the overall results, what we've seen from Mike McCarthy, is good enough. You want to get if you want to have a coach that can help you get to the playoffs, teams need that. That is not my goal in Dallas. I want more than that. You know, if you're a rebuilding team looking for some stability, some structure, Mike McCarthy could make some sense for you. But if you want more than that, I don't think that's a great option for Dallas. So I do agree with Mike McCarthy on that front. Today's show is made possible by Z-Biotics, the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It's the holiday season, and you might not bounce back the same way you did on New Year's Day the way you used to, if we're being honest here. That's why you should try out Z-Biotics. It is the pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It is this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Remember to drink the probiotic before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. From Christmas Day celebrations, New Year's Eve, the holiday season is packed with events. Don't let the festivities leave you feeling less than merry. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic can help you save the night and seize the next day. Stay in the loop. Go to zbiotics.com/chatsports. Use the QR code on screen to get 15% off your first order when you use code chatsports at checkout. They have 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Head to zbiotics.com/chatsports and use code chatsports to save 15% off at checkout. Thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode and our good times. Links in the comments and the description of today's show. It's where things get fun. Hire Ben Johnson is step number 3 in ESPN's plan. And it's not just hire Ben Johnson. It is break the bank for Ben Johnson. Barnwell's proposal is a 5-year, $125 million contract to coach the Dallas Cowboys. Here's the pitch from Barnwell. The Cowboys can't subvert the salary cap and they can't buy first-round picks, but spending on coaches is uncapped. Paying Johnson this much would represent a significant investment and probably make every other team in the league angry. But coaches as a whole are underpaid. The franchise is valued as being worth more than $10 billion by Forbes. If this move succeeds, Johnson would be a bargain. If it fails, Cowboys won't miss the money. I wish the Cowboys had this mindset. Jerry says he'd spend whatever it costs to win a Super Bowl. The Cowboys, though, don't spend like that. They don't spend the same amount of cash with their players, and they certainly don't spend the same amount with their coaches. In fact, Dallas, according to the reports, is paying McCarthy around $5 million bucks a year. That is near the bottom of the NFL. So is a 5x jump really realistic in coaching? You can argue if Ben Johnson's even worth it, but it doesn't really matter if you just want to get your guy because, again, there's no impact on the salary cap spending. Now, I don't know how liquid the Jones boys actually are because a lot of their money is tied up in the team itself and other investments. I would love to see them do this. I don't think it's very realistic, unfortunately. So what is your confidence level in general for the Jones boys to spend? My number is very low. Scale it for me from 1 to 10 in the comments section. Step 4 was a multiple player mentioned plan. That is moving on from various veterans. First up is Brandin Cooks. Now, Barnwell did advocate as part of this step to go get a veteran receiver to pair with Lamb and Mingo and Tolbert, which, sure, there was no veteran receiver mentioned. I feel like he was probably going to just say Stephon Diggs, which, okay, it's fine. Cooks' production is fallen off a cliff. And I do think adding some more speed would be nice at wide receiver. I actually am okay to move on from Cooks and find somebody else because I don't want to start the receiving core as constructed isn't good enough. And Cooks is the one that's easy to move on from, so it's pretty logical to me. Next up is Zack Martin, and this one's just retirement, basically. Even if Martin does come back, which I think is unlikely, he's not the same guy anymore. And I think it's, in general, better growth and schematic stuff from your coaching staff with run game schemes and better blocking, too, and growth from other young players. But they've been better up front without Zack Martin in the lineup, which is, it's sacrilegious to say, but it's also a fact. Barnwell did say expect a front 7 and offensive line heavy draft. I don't know how heavy you need to go on the offensive line in terms of the draft unless you move on from Terence Steele, which was kind of a maybe from Barnwell, which I do think is the proper way to approach this. It is a maybe. The sacks are too high this year. It's fact. And when he gets beat, he tends to get beat pretty quickly. Terence Steele has been a still very good run blocker. I would like to remind everyone of that. His run blocking grades are much more like it was in 2022 than they were in 2023, except the pass rush getting beat ratio is still too high. He is not as good as he was in 2023. He looks a little bit more like the guy we saw back in 2021. That's a bit more in line with the player we've seen, but there's too many quick beats out of Steele this year. I will say, he has gone 4 games in a row with 0 sacks. Part of that is a very quick passing game concept because they don't want to put Cooper Rush in more danger, and they're not taking any shots downfield. So asterisk it, but I do think he's stabilized his play at least a little bit as of late. The contract is what matters here. He's due $18.13 on the cap, $14 million in salary. That includes game roster bonuses too, worth some good chunk of change there. The cap savings are $4.63 if you cut him right now, $14 million if you make him in a post-June 1st cut. Got to carry the cap hit, pays for your draft class, rollover money too, so there's value there. You got to make a decision early, though. $13.25 million base salary element of the $14 million guarantees on March 17th. So a decision will be made early on Terence Steele. I'm open to either because it is tough to find a starting caliber right tackle, even a low-end caliber right tackle like Terence Steele is, but you better have a backup plan if you do move on. Now, are you a diehard Cowboys fan? Hope so. You made it 11 minutes into the video, basically. Hit that sub button for more free Cowboys videos, youtube.com/CowboysTV. Step 5 is to keep Tank Lawrence and pay Micah Parsons. Now, for some reason, Barnwell mentioned Marvin Overshown as part of this. Feel like sometimes people are looking at sack numbers for Overshown and going, oh, he's a blitzer. He's not. He's been an off-ball linebacker pretty clearly. Also mentioned bringing back Lawrence for a deal less than $10 million. Tank's coming off an injury, and I don't know if you're going to see him play again this season. That's going to tank his value. Pun not intended. I apologize for that. Maybe you can bring that back on a cheap one-year deal. Now, the Micah extension is going to be expensive. If you prioritize it early, you'll save money. At least you'll have more cap space to spend too. Barnwell mentioned maybe he wants $40 million a year. He proposed $185 for $37 million a year. It's actually not that bad. I know it's big sticker shock number. Trust me, I do. But that it would tack on to the fifth-year option. So your 6 years, a little over $200 million. The big hits are not going to come for 3 years. You can afford to do that and spend more elsewhere. So grade Bill Barnwell's plan for the Cowboys. A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know in the comments section of today's show. My grade's a B. It's a fine start. It's a fine, beginning to your offseason plan. I think you can argue for keeping Zimmer depending on, I think actually Zimmer with Ben Johnson I have no complaints about that at all. And I do love the aggression of getting Ben Johnson. I love that. I wish the Cowboys had that mindset. Not sure how it is, but I love the idea of it. I do think one big thing was missing from this, and that's why it's not an A. You got to spend in free agency. I wish there had been more specific plans for adding talent beyond front seven heavy draft, which I agree with, and, moving on and getting a veteran wide receiver. You got to spend some money this offseason. My big thing I'm going to hammer home this offseason early on. If you do not adjust your strategy, if you are not aggressive in this window, it's not going to work. You might be a playoff team. You might win a playoff game. You're not going to be a champion. You have to be more aggressive and be like the other top contending teams. Otherwise, the margin for error from playoff time gets out of whack. It's too thin, and it's not going to lead to the results that we all want. There were no real plans for adding talent in that list. Retaining guys, moving on for guys, sure. Adding ones, I need to see more examples, and there are examples. Same for re-signing others. Like, hey, you mentioned you need a front seven heavy draft. You kept Tank. Who are your defensive tackles? Right now, my specific guy under contract is Mozzie. That's not good enough. So we will go more in depth on our own list once the season wraps up, so make sure you guys are subscribed.